I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
I'll trade you Kyler Murray for Derrick Henry.
No way. You can't trust a rookie. Give me Baker instead.
So in today's episode, we're going to be looking at a bunch of different types of sports debates because due to the lacking of sports news, we're just going to throw some hypotheticals out there and see what Michael has to say and what I have to say and try to debate each other. So with our first topic, we're going to be doing an NFL this or that. So if I'm presenting mine to Michael, I'm going to give, say, like two players, like which would you rather have, or two different scenarios, and then he's going to pick which one, and then I'm going to hear his argument, and then I'm going to agree with him or disagree with him. So For my first one, would you rather have, or I guess it's more of a would you rather, right?
Yep.
Would you rather have Von Miller or Khalil Mack right now?
Oof. That's a really tough one. If you said give me Von Miller or Khalil Mack, but you could kind of go back to Von Miller's 2015 season, I would say Von Miller. Von Miller in that 2015 season, that is the best individual season by a defensive player I've ever seen in my lifetime. Von Miller is one of my favorite players. But right now, I would say Khalil Mack. And I know it would just be just for a season, but I think Khalil Mack is just a better football player right now. I think even though obviously Von Miller is still a great player, I think he's lost a step a little bit, and I think he's kind of relegated to his pass rushing role now more so than his all-around game that he used to play. Khalil Mack is still great at not only getting sacks and creating pressure, but he's also a really good run stopper too. And so that's probably why I would pick Khalil Mack over Von Miller, but that one's really close.
Yeah, this was, when I was writing my list up, this was one that I thought would be really pretty much a toss-up.
Yeah.
They're pretty like similar players. They're both outside linebackers, but have more of an edge rushing role.
Yeah, they're both 3-4 linebackers.
Yeah. And they're pretty similar in age. Von Miller's 31 and Khalil Mack's, I think, 29. So
yeah,
age isn't really a big factor, but I think I would pick Von Miller just because of like his role. The Bears have a pretty solid defense, so they don't his Khalil Mack's potential is kind of toned down a little bit just because of the cast around him. That's why I think Von Miller is more of a star on the defense because the Broncos defense isn't what it used to be.
Yeah,
that's I think because he would still have the stats no matter who is around his defense. That's why I would pick up Von Miller.
That's true. That's very fair. It's really helpful when you could get single teamed instead of getting double and triple teamed. That's why the 2015 Broncos are so great, because not only you had Von Miller off the edge, but you had DeMarcus Ware as well. So that is a really good point. The Bears defense is definitely a better defense than the Broncos. Khalil Mack was doing more on the Raiders than he has on the Bears. But nonetheless, I think Khalil Mack is still a great player. Great combination of speed and size. So can't go wrong with either, for sure.
Yep.
So I'll hit you with my first would you rather. And again, both similar players. Both, I think, could be toss-ups. So would you rather have Christian McCaffrey, who just got signed to that big deal, or Saquon Barkley for right now and in the future?
Yeah, I had this one on mine, but I took it off. I think I'd rather have Saquon Barkley. I think just because I think they're both incredible players, but I think just because their builds, I think Christian McCaffrey, he's a bit of a smaller guy, so that might if he gets hit, that might allow him to get be more of a punishment just because he's smaller. And Saquon his legs are massive, so it would be hard to a hit that might be more detrimental to Christian McCaffrey might not affect Saquon the same way.
Yeah.
And I still think that Saquon's fast. He's extremely fast. He has the hand. So I feel like he's an upgraded version of Christian McCaffrey. Although their stats last year, Christian McCaffrey had a lot better stats. But I just think that Saquon's not on the best New York Giants team, and Ron Rivera with the Panthers really emphasized ground and pound and giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey as much as he can.
Yeah. For similar reasons you pick Saquon, I'm actually going to pick Christian McCaffrey because Saquon Barkley, because he's a bigger back, his run style is more put my shoulder pads down and I'm going to hit you, whereas Christian McCaffrey is a little bit more elusive and he tries to get out of bounds more. So I think Saquon Barkley, because of that, because he's a bigger build running back, he's more aggressive, and that causes him to take more hits and bigger hits, and that's why he's going to be not as durable. I think in the long run as Christian McCaffrey hasn't really had an injury history yet, and Saquon Barkley's season was riddled with injuries last year. I know he had that nagging ankle injury all year that really caused him to not only be out, but then not play at his highest level. And I just think Christian McCaffrey has contributed to more win shares than Saquon Barkley has over his career so far. I just think he's had a greater effect on the team overall than Saquon Barkley has. And I think Christian McCaffrey is just a slightly better pass catcher out of the backfield. So for those reasons, I'm going to pick Christian McCaffrey. But again, it's really close.
Yeah, but I just think Saquon, he's not really, I don't think he's opting for the contact. He's not really lowering his shoulder. He has incredible finesse and wiggle. I don't know if you've seen the video. There's him doing a 3-on-3 drill at Penn State, and he just jukes out everybody. And it's in a 5-yard radius that they're playing in.
Yeah, I have seen that video. Yeah, he's an incredible talent, Saquon Barkley. But again, he's had a little bit of an injury history. He's a great player. He's a beast in the weight room. Christian McCaffrey can't match his physique, but I just think Christian McCaffrey is a slightly better player right now.
Yeah, but I just think the way that he's getting, I just don't want him to. He might be run into the ground by the Panthers just the way they're up their team. That's why if you're looking at longevity, maybe just of how many carries he gets and how many balls he catches out of the backfield.
Yeah, hopefully Matt Rule starts to diet down with the amount of touches he gets, because what he did last season is not sustainable at all. He can't keep having 2,000 all-purpose yards because he's going to be running to the ground. He's just going to be another DeMarco Murray or David Johnson if he continues his trajectory. But same with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is really the only focal point to that New York Giant offense. So both of them could be mismanaged and run into the ground. That's another reason I'll pick Christian McCaffrey, because I think the Panthers are just a better football team than the Giants right now. I think they're a better organization right now, and I think they have a better coaching staff right now. Now, I know Matt Rule is pretty unproven, and so is Joe Judge.
Yeah, Joe Judge.
But I have a little bit more faith in Matt Rule. He turned that Temple program into a winning program. Then he went to Baylor, I believe.
Baylor, and they were in the Big 12 championship game this year.
Yeah, exactly. And Joe Judge, out of all the seasons, the Giants could have picked the wide receiver coach for the Patriots. The Giants pick the Patriots wide receiving core's worst season in 20 years, which is, I think, is such a Giant thing to do. But I think Joe Judge is going to be a good coach. You don't have to be the best in terms of schematics to be a great coach. John Harbaugh is a great example of that. He was a special teams coordinator before he was head coach of the Ravens. But nonetheless, I think Panthers are a little bit better than the Giants right now. So I think they'll manage their star running back a little bit better, especially considering they did just give him this big contract. So we'll see.
Yeah, I just think that the Giants, they got to build their team around Saquon. They don't want to just ruin his career. They need weapons around him to more wide receivers to open up the passing lane so teams don't know it's always going to be a run.
Yeah. I hope they do that, because it would be a shame to see both of those talents get wasted on bad teams. But
all right, so for my next one, it's my turn, right? You just want Okay.
Yep.
Would you rather have the Dolphins draft situation, which is 5 picks in the first 2 rounds and 3 in the first round, or would you want a guaranteed playoff berth next year? So you don't know if you're going to win the playoff game or you're going to lose it. there you have it.
I'd for sure take the Dolphins draft situation because you make a playoff game. Let's say you make a playoff run. That doesn't formulate into anything in the future. The NFL is a league where you do great in the playoffs one year. That momentum does not carry over to the next season. Look at the Jaguars. The Jaguars made the AFC Championship game. They were a play away, a fourth down conversion away from being in the Super Bowl, beating the Patriots and dethroning the Patriots. They turned that into 2 abysmal seasons the next 2 seasons. So momentum really doesn't carry from season to season. That's why I would pick the draft picks because those are much more sustainable from season to season. And you can draft cornerstone players with those draft picks, or you could trade those draft picks to go get even a better draft pick and a better prospect. So that's why I would pick the Dolphins draft capital over a guarantee playoff spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would pick the draft, the draft situation because like you can scout each player, you know who you're gonna get, and if you make the playoffs, who knows if you're gonna make it the year after? Who knows what's gonna happen to your roster after that? Like you might make the playoffs once and it's gonna just implode the next year. So I think you have those 5 picks. You can trade up, like you said, get someone better, or you can just draft someone at each pick, and then you have those players under rookie contract for 4 years.
Yep.
And then you can have a young core for the next couple of teams and really build a solid team around it. Because then if you start with that young core, if you build a momentum, then you can get more free agents around the team, which also might be a way. If you get a playoff berth, you might actually get free agents too.
That's true.
So that's a little pushback on the Dolphins situation.
Yeah, I know so many teams in the NFL would sell their soul to make one playoff appearance. So I think a lot of NFL GMs would pick the playoff game, but I think it would be much smarter in the long run and even intermediately to get those draft picks and get those young players.
Yeah, I think like a team that's in a really long playoff drought might want to take that playoff berth.
Yeah, like the Browns would do it immediately.
Unholy things to get that playoff berth.
Yeah, they would. So it's my turn now.
Yep.
Would you rather have Jared Goff or Jimmy Garoppolo? 2 NFC West quarterbacks. Very similar games, I think.
That's a tough one.
Yep.
I think I'd rather have Garoppolo.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you put him in the under center and he'll get the job done. He won't have the best stats, and like he's not going to throw for like 300 yards. He might have a couple like 1 interception or 2 interceptions, but he'll be a game manager. Great game manager. He studied under Brady, so he knows like how to manage a game.
Mm-hmm.
He'll get you to victory. He'll do what he has to do to get the W. I think Goff. If Goff doesn't have someone like McVay on the sideline, I think he would really struggle. Because I think you have, up till 15 seconds before the microphone's cut off, but like the connection between the coach and the quarterback is cut off. So I think McVay makes a lot of adjustments for Goff there.
Yeah.
So I think he really struggles, and he doesn't all the time. Like I think it's a one read play most of the time. He doesn't really. It's not a lot of him like making things up on the fly. It's more of him just waiting for that one guy to get open.
Yeah. So we're talking about the 2 most recent quarterbacks that were in the Super Bowl for the NFC. I would pick Jimmy Garoppolo for the sole reason that I think his mental processing in terms of reading defenses is just slightly better and slightly faster than Jared Goff's. I thought Jimmy Garoppolo actually played pretty well in the Super Bowl. Not great, but pretty well. They're both above average game manager type quarterbacks where they could win you games every couple of games, every couple of seasons, but for the most part, you want a great team around these quarterbacks. In the Super Bowl where the Rams lost to the Patriots, we saw a lot of times great example was that Brandon Cooks play twice where he had him open and he missed him just because he was a second late on his read. So he threw it a second late. So I think if you want to go back and watch that Super Bowl, that's a great example of how Jared Goff's mental processing is just a second too late sometimes, which makes the throw look inaccurate when in reality it was just because of the read. Where Jimmy Garoppolo, he's pretty quick and good with his decisions. But again, he's not going to go out and win you a game to game. So I think that's very close. But yeah, I would also go Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, I just think that Goff, he's kind of like digress a little bit.
Yeah.
Each year, I think he's just, like you said, in the Super Bowl, a lot of the throws were late, which could have really altered the game. There's 2 throws to Brandon Cooks, the one in the back of the end zone, and the one I think was like 3 yards out of the end zone.
Yeah.
Really altered the game.
Yeah.
All right, for my next one, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I thought I'd try anyways.
All
Would
right.
you have Kyler Murray or Joe Burrow?
Wow. All right. That was my last one, actually, here.
Really?
I have that one, too. Yeah. This one is really interesting. I did do a lot of thinking about this one when I even put it on my list. I think it's really hard at this point to argue that Joe Burrow is a better football player than Kyler Murray is just because they had very similar college seasons. I think Joe Burrow had a better college season. Maybe you could say Joe Burrow's slightly better of an NFL prospect going into the NFL than Kyler Murray was. But just because Kyler Murray played 16 games last year versus NFL talent, NFL players, NFL teams, and Joe Burrow played 0 games against NFL teams, I think it would be really hard to make the argument to pick Joe Burrow at this point, but I'm going to try to do it, and I'm going to pick Joe Burrow, despite me being a Cardinals fan, for this simple reason. When you're studying quarterbacks and you're trying to decide which one's better, and both are really, really good, both check out all your boxes, you start to look at things where they're not vital, but they help a lot. And where Joe Burrow stands out with Kyler Murray is just their personalities and who they are as people. And Joe Burrow is not an introvert. He's a leader of men. He's very vocal. He's cool. He's a quarterback. You don't have to watch him play football to know Joe Burrow is a quarterback. I think he can go into an NFL locker room immediately, be the leader of that team, and really just captivate guys. You saw so many mic'd up moments of Patrick Mahomes this year motivating his guys. That's so important. Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, all these great players. Not only do they show how great they are on the field and captivate their team on the field, but they also do that on the sidelines after every single drive and possession, and they do that in the locker room. And that's what worried me about Kyler Murray a little bit. While I think he is good enough of a talent, he's a transcendent talent. So I think those things don't matter so much when you're that transcendent and you could lead and rally your troops by how good you are. And I do think Kyler Murray does that. I think Kyler Murray's a player where he's introverted. I saw many interviews of Christian Kirk, Chandler Jones, Larry Fitzgerald say they even had to break Kyler Murray out of his shell. He wouldn't even talk to anybody because he's just a very introverted guy. He's quiet. I think, again, unless you're a Kyler Murray type talent, I think that hurts you. We saw the Titans this year go from having an introverted quarterback, Marcus Mariota, to having Ryan Tannehill, who's more of a vocal guy. I don't think their talent is that far off, but you saw how that Titans team exploded under Tannehill because they really just rallied around him. So, again, for that reason, I'd pick Joe Burrow just because I do think Joe Burrow is that leader type guy. I think with Kyler Murray, you need a Larry Fitzgerald on your team. You need a Chandler Jones on your team to be that leader because Kyler Murray, although he does lead by his play on the field, he doesn't lead vocally in the locker room. And I do think that is important. So that's why I would pick Joe Burrow.
I think I agree with like him being a leader, and that's what you need for a quarterback because you're the centerpiece of the team. You're looked up by the younger guys. But I think I'm gonna take Kyler Murray for this one.
Mm-hmm.
By like just looking at the trend of the NFL with their quarterbacks, with Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, you need someone that can move around the pocket, make off-balance throws, sidearm, flick of the wrist. You know, you're not really going to be able to set your feet. And
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, you see with Kyler Murray, he's really able to run around the pocket. He has a cannon for an arm. Like he doesn't necessarily even need to step up into the throw. He can just flick his wrist and it goes 50 yards down the field. Joe Burrow, he's a great quarterback, and he was a former Buckeye, so I have some respect there. But I think
Ohio guy too.
Yeah, Ohio guy. But he's lacking with his arm strength a little bit.
Yeah.
He could make like short throws and intermediate throws, but his deep ball is not always there.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
What you can tell you.
I think his arm talent, even though it's not incredible, I think it's good enough in the NFL to get by. We saw a lot of all-time great players: Phil Simms, Troy Aikman, even Joe Montana, for examples. None of those guys had out of this world, like just popping off their arm talent. But if you're accurate enough and you have good enough of an arm, I think you can get away with it a little bit. Now, I think it will be somewhat of a struggle, and he'll have some bad throws due to his arm talent, playing in Cincinnati, playing in Cleveland, playing in Pittsburgh, and playing in Baltimore, all tough places to play, especially later in the season when it gets cold there. But I think Joe Burrow's arm talent, again, I think it's good enough in terms of strength. And with what you're saying with pocket quarterbacks kind of going out of style, that is definitely true. But Joe Burrow is very elusive in the pocket, and he has a great feel for the pocket. He always knows when to step up into the pocket, and he knows how to step out of the pocket. So Kyler Murray is definitely more elusive than Joe Burrow is, and he's more mobile than Joe Burrow is. But I think Joe Burrow is not a dead statue in the pocket who, as soon as something happens, he's going to fall to the ground. That's not Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is still mobile enough to get away with it, I think.
Yeah, he's very mobile. He's very he knows how to maneuver around the pocket. But I think just getting outside of the pocket, because you don't know, like the thing great about Kyler, you don't know if he's going to run it or if he's going to step up and throw it outside of the pocket. And when you mentioned the players in like the 80s and 90s, that game was a lot different. It was a lot kind of like slower. The receivers now are a lot faster.
Yeah.
So I think someone like Kyler Murray, like if you have an offense that's just built around speed with Kyler Murray, and then you have someone like a wide receiver who's a burner too, it just really opens up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Joe Burrow's definitely used to throwing to NFL talented wide receivers because LSU has a lot of NFL talent on that team, both in their backfield and their wide receiving core. So I don't think that will be a big problem for him to adjust to. So
definitely, yeah.
So I'll go next. Would you rather have George Kittle or Travis Kelce?
That's a hard one. That is a hard one. I think I'd rather have George Kittle. I think that just you watch something like the Saints game, like he took over that Saints game, and he really he would not take no for an answer on that one play. You know what I'm talking about? He would just was going through everybody. I think he's a complete football player. He can catch the ball. He's pretty fast for a tight end. He can block really well. Travis Kelce, he's sometimes like I just don't know about like his hands. Like sometimes I've seen him drop some balls, which is a little questionable. But I just think that George Kittle is more complete than Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I agree. I'd pick George Kittle. They're both great players, both great pass catching tight ends, and both great run blocking and even pass blocking tight ends. So they're really close there. I would pick George Kittle for all the reasons you said, and I think George Kittle's a bit of a better just teammate and
Yeah.
a bit of a better football personality to have in your locker room. Travis Kelce's great. He's fun, but he's a bit of a hothead sometimes. Obviously, you had that really bad penalty and ejection when he threw his towel at the referee. That was hilarious, but that's a type of play where you simply just can't do that because it hurts your team. So for that reason, and just because George Kittle is just such a great football player, and they're so close to the point where you do start looking at things like that, that is why I would pick George Kittle.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kelce's a bit of a hothead. I think he's more like an arrogant guy than George Kittle.
Yeah. George Kittle's hilarious on the sidelines. He really is. He's a great mic'd up player.
Definitely. So would you rather have 2 years of someone like an older quarterback like Drew Brees, Roethlisberger, like someone that you know is going to get you into the playoffs for 2 years, or would you rather start the future with a new young gun?
I would start the future with a new young gun, and not only because obviously that would be better for the future of the franchise. I wouldn't have to worry about drafting a quarterback anytime soon. But for winning a championship's sake, I would pick a young quarterback over an old veteran just because of how teams are constructed. If I have to pay my veteran quarterback $20-30 million a year, then some other areas of my team are going to be depleted because I'm paying one player all this money. You saw with the Cowboys, you saw with maybe the Cowboys aren't the best example, but you see with teams, they really try to hone in on the window between the first 5 years of a quarterback's or their quarterback's career because they're getting paid such a low amount of money compared to other quarterbacks in the league and other players on their roster, to the point where it's so valuable to have a good young quarterback because the rest of your team could be good. You saw the Chiefs just last year. Patrick Mahomes is making that much money. The Chiefs are an incredible team, so they can surround him with so much talent. That is a big reason why they won. If Patrick Mahomes had a huge contract, I don't know if they would have won. They wouldn't have signed Tyrann Mathieu, etc. You saw with the Seahawks, they haven't had the same success they had with the Legion of Boom because they're paying Russell Wilson all this money now, so they can't have a Legion of Boom. You saw with the Rams. The Rams made the Super Bowl with Jared Goff on his rookie contract. The Rams had a great roster, a great talented roster, and they wouldn't have had that roster if Jared Goff was making the current money he's making now. And you even saw this Rams team last year not as good. And even going into next season, this Rams team isn't that good. So, and even the Cowboys, they really tried to hone in that team when Dak Prescott was on his rookie year or rookie deal. So now I think the Cowboys championship window is over, large part because Dak Prescott has to get paid like a franchise quarterback now. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I don't really have much more to say about that. I think that when you have someone on like a rookie contract for 4 years, 5 years, it's a really vital time to build like a strong team around him and more of a win now. I mean, maybe I can see someone picking the older quarterback just for like experience in the playoff, and if you have a good team around them already, that like there's a good chance that you'll be able to make a deep run. But I think just having a young quarterback, you're really building for the future and having a successful franchise.
Yeah, I agree completely. So I have one more to give to you, and this is comparing both players. Well, one is retired, one is out of their prime. For the sake of this argument, both players are dead smack in the middle of their prime. Pick any year that you want them, but this is their best year when you think about these two players. So would you rather have a prime Julian Edelman or a prime Wes Welker?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I'd rather have I don't know. I gotta think about that.
Yeah, I really like that one.
I'll take Wes Welker.
Okay.
I just think when he was on the Patriots, and the Broncos for that matter, he led the team. I don't know about the Broncos personally, but I know about the Patriots. He led them in catches for all those years, or most of the years he was on them. So he was an extremely reliable target to Brady.
Yep.
Well, if you in the playoffs sometimes, which he had a couple drops, but I think you can't really blame him for some of those. I think when we were discussing it earlier a couple weeks ago, you said that Brady was like overthrown him, or it was a bad ball.
Yeah, it was like overthrown to his left shoulder, so he had to turn all the way around. That wasn't really his fault.
He's a super reliable. He didn't really get hurt. I know Edelman tore his ACL, and this recent year he was injured a lot. It's like his body's kind of like, I don't know, falling apart. They're in their prime. They're in their prime. I can't use that.
Yeah.
But I just think that Edelman is really reliable. He's fast. With Peyton, he's just a leader of wide receivers. Yeah, maybe I should have took Edelman instead. I don't know.
So I'll pick Julian Edelman just because I think he's just a bit more versatile in what Julian Edelman could do. Obviously, Julian Edelman used to be a quarterback. You can have him throwing passes, have him on kind of gimmicky trick type plays, but he's just more versatile as not only a football player, like I just said, he's a very good special teams player. He's good at returning punts, returning kicks. I know Wes Welker did a little bit of that too, but I know even one season, I think it was his third season, they had him play linebacker in a couple of snaps. He's really good at tackling, but he just has a bigger route tree, I think, than Wes Welker ever did, with just not only short to intermediate routes, which these two guys lived off of, but I think Julian Edelman runs a little bit more deep routes than Wes Welker does, even though Julian Edelman still doesn't too much. And I just think Julian Edelman is one of the greatest playoff wide receivers of all time. Now, I know that's large part in due because his quarterback's Tom Brady and he's played for the dynasty Patriots, but he's a Super Bowl MVP. We can't forget that. And he has the most catches in playoff history. So I don't think that could be understated.
Yeah, I agree. Wes Welker is very reliable. They're both very reliable. It's pretty. Yeah. I think it's a pretty close argument. No matter what, they're pretty similar players. So for my last one, would you rather have Odell Beckham or Michael Thomas?
Give me Michael Thomas. Now, I think Odell Beckham has a bit of a bigger route tree than Michael Thomas does. They're both kind of diva wide receivers in a sense. They both demand the ball a lot. But what Michael Thomas was able to do this season with not only Drew Brees at quarterback, where Drew Brees, he really doesn't have the greatest arm anymore. He's not a threat to throw 40, 50 yards down the field. So the field's shorter for Michael Thomas than it is with Odell on the Giants and on the Browns. But just what he did with Teddy Bridgewater, his backup quarterback, they were kind of dinking and dunking him the ball. I just think to put up such an impressive season where you had two quarterbacks play for you, two quarterbacks who aren't down the field throwing quarterbacks at this point in their careers either. I just think that's extremely impressive. And just his skills with creating after the catch is a little bit better than Odell's. I think he has a little bit better hands and consistent hands than Odell. And he just has a bigger frame and body. So I think he could be better than Odell in 50-50 jump balls. So for those reasons, I'd pick Mike Thomas.
I would pick Michael Thomas too, because if you throw the ball his direction, you know he's going to catch it. He's not the fastest guy, but he's just extremely reliable. You can he'll put him in the middle of the field, he'll catch the ball, he'll get some yards after it. But Odell, for the argument for Odell, like he's a burner, so if you give him a slant, he can take it 70 yards for the touchdown.
Yeah.
But also his hands aren't reliable all the time. he drops some balls. I think he focuses more on the one-hand catches, which might, I don't know, cause his muscle memory with two hands to be off a little bit.
Yeah. And we've seen that at various points in Odell's career, struggling with catching easy, basic balls right in his hand or right on his chest. 2 games right off the top of my head pop out to me, which is a couple years ago when the Giants were facing, I'm not sure if the Panthers were still undefeated.
Yeah, the Panthers. I think it was the Panthers.
At that point in the season, but they did play the Panthers with Josh Norman, yeah. And Odell was doing a great job against Josh Norman, but he was simply just dropping balls. I think he had 3 or so drops that game. And then obviously the Packers-Giants playoff game, he had 3 drops in that game too. So two of the biggest games of Odell's career, he came up short. So I think that's maybe not a red flag for Odell, but I think that's something to keep your eye on where he hasn't performed the best under the biggest stages. So
yeah, he was just Michael Thomas is just extremely reliable. And I think he has less off the field antics than Odell.
Yeah.
He's a little hothead on the field, but he's not really causing issues anywhere else, I feel like.
Yeah.
And he's a Buckeye.
We haven't really seen Mike Thomas not get the ball a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas we've seen Odell not get the ball a lot and see what happens and due to that. Now, I think a similar thing would happen with Michael Thomas if he didn't get the ball a lot. We just haven't seen him in that situation, so I really can't assume anything in terms of that. Yeah. So that's another reason I pick Mike Thomas.
I think just Michael Thomas I think he's targeted so much just because he catches it. They know he's going to catch it if they throw it, like the quarterback.
Yeah.
All right. You want to move on? You ready to move on?
Yep. Let's do it.
All right. So for our next topic, we're going to do a little NBA, and we're going to do out of young players in the league today, which player would you pick to start an NBA franchise?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
So before I get into it, actually, the NBA polls all the GMs before the season and asks this exact question: who would you want to start a franchise with? This year, Giannis got over 80% of the vote, which is just incredible. So people in GMs unanimously almost picked Giannis, but I'm not going to pick Giannis. So if I were to pick one player to start an NBA franchise with right now, I'd pick Luka Doncic. So Luka is a 21-year-old, 6'7" point forward with a very similar game to LeBron, where both players are going to fill up the stat sheet night in and night out. So Luka this season, in his second season in the NBA, is 6th in points per game with 28.7 points per game, which is only 0.2 points behind number 5 Damian Lillard. So he's almost already top 5 in scoring in the NBA. He's 4th in the league in assists with 8.7 a game. He has the most rebounds per game for a player who is not listed at power forward or center. So he has the most rebounds per game at 9.3 rebounds per game for a point guard, shooting guard, or small forward, along with shooting 57% from inside the three-point line, which is just incredibly efficient. He also has the second highest usage rate in the league behind Giannis, while leading his team to the 7th seed in a very competitive Western Conference, which is in his Mavericks are only 4 games out from the 3-seeded Nuggets. And the Mavericks don't really have the greatest roster. I think if you took Luka off the Mavericks, I think the Mavericks are the worst team in the NBA. That's just my opinion. Luka is a great shot creator, both for himself and his teammates. So in a playoff setting, Luka is great in half-court offense, which is just so vital in the playoffs because he just has such a great ability to see the floor, driving kick to suck defenses in, and draw the defense out with his ability to hit tough off-the-dribble fadeaways and three-point shots. His defense is probably the biggest weakness to his game right now, but he's by no means a horrible defender. He's probably around league average at defense at this point, I would say, with a very high defensive IQ, which allows him to steal the ball through reading and blocking passing lanes. So in the playoffs, there's a bigger emphasis on team defense. So with good team defenders and one-on-one defenders around him, very similar to Steph Curry in the Warriors, I think his playoff weaknesses can be easily minimized, easier than it is to minimize Giannis's playoff weaknesses. Now, Giannis is an all-NBA defender with great length and versatility, which makes him one of the most valuable defenders come playoff time and just in the league, period. But he's struggled so far in his career with translating his offensive game to the postseason, and that is why I had to pick Luka over Giannis. We saw the Toronto Raptors last year throw Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, and Serge Ibaka at Giannis with great success. And I know every team isn't going to have three great defenders like those three guys that they can throw at Giannis, but nonetheless, Giannis still struggles in the half-court offense in the playoffs as he's forced to try to score in a much more crowded paint, which then forces him to shoot more. So Giannis, while not a horrible three-point shooter, he still hasn't developed his three-point shot enough to the point where defenses won't sag off him and give it to him every single time, which creates spacing problems not only for himself, but the entire team. And so Giannis also falls back on a baseline and just under the free throw line type of 2-point fadeaway jumper. Uses it a lot, not only in the playoffs, but in the regular season as well, if you watch him. But that shot is one of the most inefficient shots in the game today. And come playoff times, it becomes even more inefficient. So with Giannis, we often see him in the playoffs last year not even be the primary scorer or ball handler as Malcolm Brogdon, who's now gone. And Chris Middleton came up huge in some playoff games and short in others, causing the Bucks to eventually fall short of the finals twice in back-to-back years. So I would want my franchise player to be able to carry my team offensively come playoff time. And for that main reason, I had to pick Luka over Giannis.
I agree. I think Luka, he's a great player, which he's very similar to LeBron James. And, like, he's not always looking to score the ball. He's looking to involve his teammates and pass the ball around and really, like, because if he's the only one shooting the ball, the team will focus on him. But if he's passing the ball around, that really opens the floor for everybody, like for him to score more and for the other players to score more and the defense not to know who's going to get the ball.
Yeah.
I think Giannis, his playoff, his playoff performance is a little questionable.
Yeah.
You saw him when he got like a lankier defense on him with Siakam and Kawhi that he was not able to perform as the way he really wanted to because he can't really shoot the deep ball. It's more of like a Shaquille O'Neal, like grind down low, and he was not really able to do that when he played the Raptors, which really made me question his ability to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure.
So for mine, I looked at it more of like players like in their first to third year. I didn't even look at consider someone like Giannis.
Yeah.
So I picked John Morant for mine. So a lot of people might be saying, why not Zion Williamson? I just think that the injuries with Zion are a big question mark, and his size and how reliable he'll be down the line because he's such a big player, and that's really taxing on his body and because of his playing style too. So looking at Ja's stats, he averaged almost 18 points a game, he had 3.5 total rebounds, 6.9 assists per game. If the season was to be completed, he probably was going to be the rookie of the year. And you look at the Grizzlies roster, it's not the greatest. Has Jaren Jackson around him. He had Dylan Brooks, so he doesn't really have the best roster around him. And he was leading that Grizzlies team as a 20-year-old rookie, and they were the 8th seed in the West, the competitive West, which is extremely impressive.
Yeah,
he's a really fearless player. You'll see him go head to head with a lot of the greats one-on-one, or he'll drive down low and you saw him try to dunk on Kevin Love. And also when I was looking at his college career, I was at the game, his March Madness game last year when they played Marquette, and it was just unbelievable the way he performed. He had 17 points, 16 assists, and 11 rebounds. So when he was playing a higher seed at Marquette, he was able to rise to the occasion and lead his team, get everybody involved, and win that game, which was incredible to watch.
Yeah, Ja is a great player. He reminds me a lot of a rookie year John Wall. They play pedal to the metal. They're just ferocious players, all around game with Ja. It would be great if he improved his three-point shot a little bit, which he will. Just a great player, but where I'll have to push back on Ja, and I think you need to pick Luka in a situation like this, is just simply, not only do I think Luka's a better player than Ja, but that aside, I just think a small forward is just much more valuable in today's NBA than a point guard is. And for that just simple reason, look at the past 10 finals MVPs. Except for Dirk Nowitzki, who's a power forward, all of them have been wing players. And even Dirk is a power forward who can also play on the wing because he can shoot. You need a great wing player in today's NBA to win. So if I wanted to start my franchise, I would need to start it with that wing player who could win me NBA championships, and not only win me NBA championships, but win me finals MVPs. So for that reason, not only could Luka play that wing position, but he's a small forward who can also play point guard. So he's just as valuable as any other point guard in the league in terms of revolving your offense around them and just shot creation for other teammates. I think Luka at this point of his career has actually been a better point guard than Ja Morant has been this season. So for those reasons, I would have to pick Luka over Ja.
Yeah. But I just think that if you look at Stephen Curry, I know he's a better shooter than Ja.
Yeah.
He's a guard, and before Kevin Durant, he helped lead the Warriors 2 straight finals and the best regular season team of all time. So I think that if you have someone like a guard that can really open up the passing and who can score too, and who's just really fluent with the ball, and just like if the defense of the other team is focused on Ja and where he's going to go with the ball, it really opens up the playability for everybody else. That's why I think someone like him is great to start a franchise. I'm not disagreeing with your pick for Luka. I think I would pick him as well.
Yeah, I just think with point guards, it's much easier to make them have a bad game in the playoffs. While I think Ja Morant, going on the Steph Curry comparison, obviously they're two very different players, but they're the same in the way that they're point guards, and we're asking them to lead a team to a championship in this hypothetical situation than in real life with Steph Curry. You see a lot of times with Steph Curry, he's such a great shooter, but if you really, really play physical with him and really put a body on him all game, just stick on him, then he'll have an off night, or he'll only score 20, 25 points when you need him to score 30, 35 in a playoff setting. In a Game 7 and Game 6, we saw Matthew Dellavedova get a contract after those NBA finals solely because he played really good against Steph Curry in those finals. We saw Steph Curry get minimalized somewhat in every single finals he's played in, and I do think that's simply because of his stature. And he's 6'3". He's slightly bigger than the average point guard in the NBA. But I just think you need to be both physically imposing in the playoffs and a very good shooter. That is why I picked Luka, not only over guys like Giannis who can't shoot too well, but over guys like Ja Morant who aren't as physically imposing as Luka is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point.
But Ja Morant is a great player. You just need that other wing player with him.
Yeah, I think.
While I do think with Luka, he could be far and away your best player, and you can have role players around Luka and still be very good, because I think the Mavericks have one of the worst rosters in the NBA, quite frankly, for a playoff team. Now, why am I blanking on his name? Kristaps Porzingis. He's been shaky at times this year, but he's definitely a legit second option. He's a legit second star on his team. the team's not too good besides that. And the fact that they're 7 seed, I think, is really impressive. And the fact that the Grizzlies are in the playoffs too is extremely impressive. And that is not to go understated. And I think Ja Morant has a much greater effect on wins and losses than the average point guard does because of his attacking play style. We see somebody, Trey Young, for example. I don't think a lot of people would think Ja Morant is so much better than Trey Young is, but you see the Hawks, one of the worst teams in the entire NBA, while the Grizzlies are a playoff team. Now, I know the Grizzlies are a better team and a better organization than the Hawks, but I don't think it's too far off. So I think Ja does have a great effect on teams' wins and losses because of his more physical play style and because he does a very good job at getting his teammates involved, driving and kicking, things of that nature.
Because I think he's not gonna like Trey Young. Ja's not gonna take like an absurd amount of shots like Trey Young does, which is really just kind of like brings the level of his teammates down a little bit. Like Ja's gonna get everybody involved. He has almost 7 assists. He has 6.9 assists per game, so he's getting more of his teammates involved. I think it's incredible to see like a 20-year-old leading his team in being the 8th seed in the playoffs.
Yeah, and to not get things mixed up, I'm sure Trey Young averages more assists per game than Ja Morant. Just the nature of Ja Morant's passing is very different from the nature of Trey Young's passing, in the same vein as Russell Westbrook's 10 assists per game are very different from LeBron James' 10 assists per game, because with guys like Russell Westbrook or guys like Trey Young, who average so many assists per game while still having so many shots per game, a lot of the time you see kind of dead assists. And what I mean by that, the shot clock's about to run out, they pass it to them real quick, and his teammate makes a shot. Things of that nature, whereas Ja Morant and LeBron James and Luka, throughout the game, they're getting their players involved. And that's so important, especially come playoff time, because you don't want to drive and kick to a player who's shot 2 shots all game in the fourth quarter of a finals game. You want to drive and kick to somebody who's shot 10 times in the game. Yeah. And I think players like Ja Morant do a really good job at getting their teammates involved all game, so they're not ice cold come fourth quarter, come a situation where they can't just ISO and get a bucket. They need their teammates.
Ja keeps them fresh and keeps everybody involved throughout the whole game, so they're ready for the fourth quarter.
Yep.
All right, so for our next topic, this is something that I came up with. So for the rest, if you had 5 options of sports to watch for the rest of your life, and you can only watch those 5 options on TV or in real life, what would they be? And these options can be a single game, so like an NFL playoff game or an NFL game, or a series, like the World Series. But you can't pick like a full season, or you can't pick a full playoff season.
Yeah.
So you want to do a
generals.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to do a draft type format where Sam picks a sporting event or a game. I can't pick that game because I'm sure me and Sam's top 5 would be very similar, if not the same exact top 5. So just to mix things up a little bit, if I pick somebody, you can't pick them, and vice versa.
Yep. So you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think I'll take the obvious one. I'll take the holy grail, in my opinion, of sports games. It's the most watched television event in the United States year in and year out. I'm going to pick the NFL Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is just so electric. I would do anything to watch a Super Bowl. Unlike so many other sports, it's one and done. You either win this game and you are the world champions, or you lose this game and it's done. It's over. You go home. Just everything surrounding it, just the media hype, the 2 weeks before the game, even just experiencing the city come Super Bowl time. It's just so electric. Football is my favorite sport, so the Super Bowl had to be my number 1 pick for this bucket list. I really want to go to a Super Bowl one day. I would do anything to go to a Super Bowl. I think for my bucket list, it was easy to put the Super Bowl at number one.
Yeah, definitely. The Super Bowl is something I like. One of my biggest goals in life to be able to go to one. I think it's the greatest spectacle in all of sports. But actually, it wasn't my number one.
Okay.
My number one was the AFC Championship game.
Interesting. All right.
Because also it's like the Super Bowl is going to be inside or in a warmer climate. So I feel like in the AFC Championship game, you can have like playing like a snow game or a cold game. So you're going to have like that football weather type feel. And I just feel like teams play harder in the championship games to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Than they actually do in the Super Bowl. So I feel like it's just more of a harder fought game. Like a lot of the all-time great games are championship games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that they're like the Super Bowl games are bad, but I feel like their teams play harder when they're in the AFC Championship game.
No, I agree with that completely. Now, I'm not going to pick them for my list, but I did have them on my list. I was going to say NFC Championship game only because I think
I picked the AFC Championship game because like if the Colts are ever in, I would be able to watch it.
Yeah. I think that's just your AFC fan mindset kind of taking in, and maybe it's my NFC fan mindset taking in, but I just think historically the NFC has been more competitive and better than the AFC has a lot of the times. Obviously now the past two Super Bowl winners are AFC teams, but I think in both cases, if you average the 4 teams left, usually those 2 NFC teams are better than those 2 AFC teams. I think that's been the case in the 2010s. I think that's been the case in the 2000s. And that was especially the case in the 90s where the best 2, 3, 4 teams in the league sometimes were all NFC teams. So for that matter, I love your championship game pick, but I would pick NFC just because I think historically the NFC has been more competitive. There's that statistic. There's only been, 5 quarterbacks that have represented the AFC in the Super Bowl since 2000 or 2003, 2001.
Yeah, Brady, Manning, Prosper, Flacco.
Yeah.
And then Mahomes up until this year.
Yeah, exactly. So love the championship pick, but I personally would go with the NFC.
Yeah. So what's your second round pick?
So for my second round pick, pretty easy one too for me. NBA Finals Game 7.
You can pick the whole series though.
You can pick the whole series. All right, I'll go just NBA Finals series.
A 1-game option, you can only pick the 1 game, but if it's a series, you can pick the series.
All right, yeah, I'll definitely go NBA Finals. With the points both of us made in terms of championship games sometimes being more competitive than the Super Bowl, I think that could be true for the NBA, but I think it's much less true for the NBA. I still think once you get to that final setting, I know a lot of players play nervous. A lot of players play worse than they would if they weren't playing in a finals series, but just the crowds are so electric. I love about just the NBA Finals compared to the Super Bowl, where you have home court advantage, you have those electrifying crowds. I love basketball. It's my second favorite sport to not only play, but to watch. Very close second, only to football's first. But yeah, NBA Finals. Some of my favorite sports watching memories are from the NBA Finals. My favorite sports game of all time have been or was an NBA Finals game, that 2016 Game 7, Warriors Cavs. So yeah, I'd have to pick NBA Finals for my second pick. Pretty easy for me.
Yeah, that was high on my list too. I completely agreed. I feel like in the before the finals, you see like the higher seeded teams don't always play that hard, but once they get to the finals, they're playing the other top team of the other conference, so you know they have to play hard in order to win.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
So for my next one, I'm gonna go with the Stanley Cup Finals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that unlike football, I think once they get to the just the way like hockey is, like the community around it and the way the sport's built, like I think it's the finals is more competitive than like the Final Four games or Final Four. I think that the teams they play extremely hard to hold up the Stanley Cup and at the end, which personally I think the Stanley Cup's the best trophy in all of sports just because of its size and like the players holding it up at the end. It's just
And you can drink out of it, of course.
yeah, you can get it. I just think that like hockey clubs play extremely hard to at the end of the Stanley Cup Finals. Like if a game 7's close, like those are the most like on the edge of your seat, like standing up, watch like those 5 to 3 minutes of the Stanley Cup Finals are the most intense thing if it's like a 1-score game. So that's why I picked the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, it's great. Hockey, just the nature of hockey itself as well. It's such a physical game. So you have guys just going at each other for an entire season, then an entire postseason. Then once they get to the Stanley Cup Finals, it amazes me how every year it seems like these guys still aren't out of shape, still are hitting each other with full intensity. Stanley Cup Finals are always, it's arguably the greatest finals series in the entire world, honestly. Yeah. Just how electrifying and how much parity there is to those finals too. You don't see now a lot of times with 7-game series, the purpose of those are the best team always wins. But I think hockey is an example where the best team necessarily doesn't always win the Stanley Cup Finals, and I also do love that.
Yeah, I just think like the team that works harder and plays the hardest.
Yeah.
Like every player on the whole ice, like I was about to say field, but everybody on the ice like plays their hearts out the whole series. And just they win, like the handshake line at the end of the finals is like pretty good to watch, like nice to watch too, because you know that they gave it their all, and then they're going up to the other team and saying like they know they both gave it their all.
Yep. So for my next pick, my third pick, actually my top 3, I would not think I would get my top 3, and I'm gonna pick the MLB World Series. Just series. So MLB World Series, I love watching baseball, even regular season baseball, but a lot of people only tune in to MLB baseball come playoff time. That's just how great playoff baseball is. Yeah. It's another sport where it's just so electrifying. I think it's hard to score in every single sport, but I think hockey and baseball especially, it's just so hard to score in those sports sometimes. So it's just so on the edge, so on your seat. It's just so iconic, baseball. It's been America's sport, I don't think anymore, but for a very long time. And it's just a sport where players who don't have a lot of national recognition really could stand on that pedestal for having that great series. Players are born in the MLB World Series. I know one of my favorite players of all time, David Freese. He was a great player for the Cardinals, but he's really known for those World Series games. Find out later that he was drunk every single game, which is a little like heartbreaking for me as a old Cardinals fan, as a young lad watching those games. Makes sense to why he had all those infield errors, but nonetheless, I would have to pick MLB World Series. And I'm a little biased in that too because I am a St. Louis Cardinals fan, so I have attentively watched a lot of MLB World Series over my life because they have been in so many. So
yeah, I think like something special about baseball in October, like the Stanley Cup, the players just play so hard.
Yeah,
and it's just fun to watch, just a hard fought game, and like the pitchers do. And like I think like the Indians Cubs World Series, like the Cubs were down 3-1, but they still fought back, and it was one of the greatest series of all time. That game 7 went into I don't even know how many. I can't remember off the top of my head extra innings, but it was just a great baseball, and playoff baseball is great. So for my next one, I'm gonna go with the World Cup final.
Okay, I had that one on here too.
So I'm not like the biggest soccer fan, but like I think everybody watches the World Cup final. It's it's a huge spectacle. The 2 best teams in the whole entire world. It's not just like North America. which a lot of the sports that we're talking about is.
Yeah.
It's the whole world, and you see the best players in the world. You can see like a legend like Ronaldo or Messi. I know Messi hasn't won one, but you can see him play in the World Cup finals. Or you can see like last final where you saw Kylian Mbappe, who was like I think 19 years old. He played insane.
Yeah.
So you see someone like a young gun or an old legend perform, and it's just really fun to watch two countries go at it in the friendly game of football.
Yeah, it's just so great the culture around soccer and championship soccer where you have in any other sport, team wins, they go back to their city and have this huge celebration, this huge parade. Imagine that on a country scale. And that's why I think just soccer itself is so incredible when it comes to world play, because when your team wins the championship, your entire country, your neighbors, people you hate, people you love, all come together and celebrate and are all happy under that one thing. So I think that's really important. That's awesome. So my fourth, I started to dive into the Olympics here later on in my list. This is my absolutely favorite Olympic event to watch, and it's actually it's a Winter Olympic event. So my fourth is going to be the Winter Olympic men's snowboarding halfpipe. Yeah, a little bit of a surprise there.
Yeah. It's fun to watch.
Snowboarding and the snowboarding halfpipe and just winter sports in general, like snowboarding, I always forget about it. Then the Winter Olympics come by and I'm like, wow, I love watching these. And that's one reason why I love it so much, because it's not in my face. It's not every single year. It's something that I watch occasionally, but when I do watch it, it's so entertaining. There's been some really iconic people to come out of snowboarding, Shaun White as an example. It's just one of those sports, again, where not everybody could go on a snowboard and start doing all these tricks where the average person can shoot a basketball, the average person can throw a ball, things of that nature. I just think it's so extraordinary what these people could do with snowboarding. It's one of those like thrill sports where it's death defying in a sense. You're in the air on this huge half pipe doing a 360. It's just very entertaining for me to watch.
Yeah, completely agree with like considering the Olympics. I love watching the Olympics, especially swimming. Like I was always a fan of Michael Phelps growing up. I always loved watching him. And also like with the argument with the World Cup, it's country versus country in the Olympics, and it's really fun to watch those extreme sports.
Yeah.
For my next one, I'm gonna go with just any of the NCAA Final Four matchups. Yeah. Either, I don't know, like whatever side of the bracket. I'm not picking the final for the same reason I argued that I had for the AFC Championship game. I just think that the college players play harder to get to the final.
Yeah.
To get to the championship in the Final Four. I think it's just really fun to watch them play in those games.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Now, I do think there have been some extremely great classic championship games in college basketball, men's college basketball, more so than the AFC NFC Championship comparison with the Super Bowl. But again, great pick. Love March Madness. That was going to be my fifth pick, actually. Just so electric. And it's another thing where, like soccer, if you go to one of these schools that wins the championship or is having this great championship run, even if they don't win it, when you're at college, you live in your own little community, like that college town. It's your entire world. So that's another one where you see a random person walking on the sidewalk and you can be like, hey, man, you see that game last night? And everybody knows what you're talking about. Yeah. So that's another thing. It just like gets the community together, and it's just such a great culture around college sports in general, especially basketball, because I think basketball is a game where it's very simple to understand. So even if you're not a sports fan and you go to that college, you can still appreciate it. So great pick. I was going to pick that as my fifth. But instead of picking that for my fifth, I have a couple options, all Olympic events. I'm going to pick the men's 100-meter gold medal men's track race.
I mean, you can pick the whole event for like sprinting for 100 meter.
Okay, yeah, I'll just do the entire event for just sprinting, because I think if you wanted to show an alien what is the human race, what are like some of the biggest accomplishments we could achieve physically, then make them watch a 100-meter event. I think it's so fascinating just to watch these guys just run 20 plus miles per hour for such a short distance. I think it's just absolutely incredible. I think Usain Bolt is the best athlete of all time. That is a event that he absolutely dominated for 10 plus years. I think it's incredible to be on top of your sport, any sport, for 10 plus years, especially a sport like running, where it's really, really, really predicated on your physical fitness. And if you're aging and deteriorating, it's so hard to keep that up. So just the great figures we've seen in that 100-meter, just that whole Jamaican team. I know Canada has been really good in the 100-meter, and the United States have, of course, too. I just think it's just a representation of human physical prowess. So for those reasons, I just really appreciate the 100-meter. And if I can only watch 5 sporting events for my entire life, something like that would need to be in my top 5.
Yeah, definitely agree. Like I said earlier, the Olympics are great to watch. Like another first country in this, just to see someone run like that fast is insane.
Yeah.
Apparently, I think it was Britney Spears. She like put on her Instagram that she beat Usain Bolt's like all-time record, which is just hilarious.
Yeah, I saw that. That was recently.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So for my next one, I'm in between two. I got to add some college football to my list because I love college football.
Yeah, this is your last one, right?
Yeah, my last one. So I'm considering the college football championship, the college football playoff, but I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to do the game, in air quotation marks, the greatest rivalry in all of college football. I'm going to do Ohio State versus Michigan. I just picked that just because go Buckeyes. And that's just a great game. Just the amount of hatred and like school pride in those games is insane. Like if you're in the shoe on that Saturday after Thanksgiving or in Ann Arbor, just the electricity in the atmosphere is just insane. And you know those two teams that go out on the field, and they're all they're top programs, so they're gonna play their hardest because it's their bitter rival.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. I love the rivalries out of any sports, out of any organization. I love college sports rivalries the most because it's so just hatred filled. Doesn't matter who you are. You can be an 18-year-old your freshman year at that college, or you can be 60 years old, 40-year alum of that school. You're going to still have that same passion and hatred for that school where you're rivals with. And you're going to root for your team so hard. And there's so many iconic, I know you named one with Michigan and Ohio State, but there's so many other iconic, not only college football rivalries, Auburn and Alabama is one of them, but there's so many iconic basketball, baseball. You know, with basketball, obviously you have Kentucky Duke. Just so many iconic games. With another thing that fascinates me so much, you have these future NFL, and in your case, NFL talents, where I think it's really cool to see them face off at the college level, then see each other at the pro game as well. So for that reason, it interests me a lot too. So that's a great pick.
Yeah, and I just like the 2016 Ohio State Michigan game with JT Barrett. Like that's just one of like the all-time greatest games. Like that's one of my all-time favorite games I've ever watched. Like it went to overtime, Curtis Samuel scoring in overtime. Like I can still hear like the announcer saying Ohio State wins in my head. Like it's just an all-time favorite game of mine.
I love when there's just an absolute mosh pit on the field after of all the students and the band and everybody as well. It's just so fun with college football in terms of championship. You have 100 guys on your sideline compared to NFL. You got 50 guys.
Yeah.
and that's just players. Obviously, you have personnel as well. So for that reason, it's just so fun. Just seems like so many people are involved in that championship or in that game, in that rivalry. So can never go wrong with a college football rivalry.
And just like a lot of guys, they're not gonna make it to the next level. So like this is like
Yep.
like they want to make their impact on that game.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's a lot of guys going out parties, and that is their last memory of playing the sport they love. So that's a good point as well.
Well, thank you everybody for watching. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next video.